I'm a boat builder from the Cotswolds in the UK, and I'm building a boat called Temptress, designed by Michel Barriere and kitted by myself to be built utilising the latest in CAD design, CNC cutting and modern epoxy wood construction. In the previous video I got the chine clamps installed, these timbers that run along here, very typical of a hard chined boat. On this boat we've got chine flats as well, which is a stack of plywood parts that sit on top of this and form the flat sections of the chine. And that's what I'm going to be building in this video. We'll get that sat on top of there. I'll shape the chine clamp as well. And I'm also going to cap the edge of those plywood layers as well, just to give a really nice visual look within the boat. I don't really like seeing the edges of plywood. So I'll be doing that in this video. Let's get cracking. So I'm about ready to start offering up some topside battens as well as installing the chines on the boat. So it's time to get the Siberian larch down from upstairs and start getting that ready to install. Just a small round over on the two internal faces of this timber is pretty much all it needs before these are going to be ready to go into the boat. And I couldn't resist doing a bit of a mock-up of the side planking, so I put in a handful of topside battens just to clamp them in place, and that allowed me to just start to land a few of the hull side planks and get an initial view of how the boat is going to start to look. And it really comes to life when you start putting timbers like this in place. Then I'm getting ready to install the chine flat lamination. So this is that stack of plywood parts that we've CNC cut a couple of videos ago, and they just need the tabs knocking off of those, which I'm using a flush trim router bit to do on the little router table. This comprises of 3 layers of the CNC cut plywood in all, and they link together with these dovetail joints which are staggered throughout the layers. Now initially I'm just knocking back the worst of the squeezed out epoxy on the chine clamp, but I'll do a proper shape of those a little bit later on in the video, and you'll see the process I use for doing that. I want to just get the glue off initially so I can get these chine flats positioned and work out where everything's going to go. And you can see that these joints stagger throughout the layers just to make sure that we've got good distribution of those join lines, and we're going to have a really nice strong component once this is all bonded together. There's the 2 chine flats in place. really starts to reveal the shape of the boat. And here you can see some of the mock-ups I did on the hull side planking for a couple of those yellow cedar boards in place. You can really start to see that curvature that's going to come in the aft end of the boat here. And planking is going to be a really exciting stage to get to, so it gave me the motivation to start to push on through this project. And there's a little glimpse of what things will look like inside the boat. So now I'm happy with the order in which these layers are going to go, so I can start to get them glued up. So just do a quick markup of any of the glue faces so that I make sure that I apply glue in all the correct places. We don't want to be doing that wrong because it gets it into a real mess. So I'm taping up the frames on the boat just so that we don't get any glue onto those. I basically just want to laminate this in place at the moment, but not actually bond it in. So then we're over to the epoxy pump. I'm using West System 105-205 for this, and I will lightly thicken that just to give me that kind of ketchup consistency epoxy that I can roll onto either face of the plywood. We're dealing with a very flat lamination here, but we've got quite absorbent wood at the same time, so this is my kind of go-to process for that. So we're putting a little bit of 406 colloidal silica in there, and you can see that measuring this out roughly by volume, we're looking at about a third of additive to resin ratio, around about a third to a half, and you can see you can just gauge that there on the side of the cup. Get that thoroughly mixed in, and that's the kind of consistency we're looking for. Fairly runny, but a little bit thickened at the same time, thin enough that I can easily roll this onto either face. Get that straight out of the mixing pot into a large roller tray so that it doesn't start to get too hot, and that buys me a little bit more working time. I'm applying epoxy to all the exposed edges within those dovetails, and then I'm rolling it onto both mating faces within the Chine stack lamination. Now originally I was going to clamp this, but I actually opted for screws in the end because we've got 3 layers here. When I started putting the clamps on, everything was slipping around all over the place, and getting that to stay put was quite difficult. I started out with a few screws, and then actually that just worked really well. So that was plenty to pull all these layers down and keep them all in place. My main focus here is getting that internal face that is up against the framing nice and vertical between all 3 layers. The outside face is going to be shaped later on before I do the hull side planking. And some additional clamps just made sure that that was held down nice and flat to the Chine clamp. Following morning, clamps can come off again, and all the screws can come out as well. Then I can take that stack off the boat and onto the bench so that it's a little bit easier for me to clean up and do the couple of other operations on this part. Okay, so there's another big chunk of timber. Joints have come out nice, lamination's good. I'm convinced you could actually just lay this up flat. It doesn't really need to be laminated on the boat because there's such a subtle curve in this direction that you could easily pull this timber in. So anybody doing another one of these, you could quite feasibly just do that flat on the bench, I think. Obviously I don't have a bench that big, so the boat kind of works for me, but either or would be fine. Joints look really neat. So my plan initially was to then veneer this face, 3mm veneer, to get this a utility finish. I'm not convinced that's really worth bothering with now I'm looking at this. This actually looks really neat. These I quite like seeing these joints. It's a bit of a history of how the boat went together, so you'll be able to see that inside the boat. And the face grain of this Okumi ply is quite nice. It's perfectly fine. So what I think I'm going to do is just do the edge. Just cap off this edge grain ply and put a timber like this on here. Pull that into place. That'll mean I can put a nice little radius on this edge here. Close off that edge grain ply, and then that's what we'll see within the boat, is that kind of finish. That's going to look really smart. No need to veneer, because like sawing veneers for the whole face of this chine is quite a lot of work. And I'll actually cap the outside of this anyway when I plank the boat. We'll bring the planking down onto this, and then the outside of it will be capped. So that 3mm that I've lost, I can make that up quite feasibly in other ways, so I don't really need to worry about that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to machine some stock to cap the edges of this. We'll get that glued on, and I'll run with that. Quite happy with that. So this is a really old compass plane that I've got. As you can see, you can adjust that so that the sole can be curved either convex or concave, and it's brilliant just for edging things like this that have slight curves to them. We'll also use this on the hull sides when it comes to getting into those scoops in the top sides where the kind of S-shaped reverses in the tumble home of the boat. Now, I knew this was a really old plane. I didn't know for certain how old it was. It's just something that I bought on eBay because I knew I was going to need one at some stage. On the side of the plane, you can just about see here, it's got what I thought was 1779, which I thought may have been its original age. Following a post on Facebook and some information from followers on there, I've since discovered that it's actually June 1779, which is probably 1879, and likely when this design of plane was created. They said that the actual model that I've got here was probably produced between 1897 and 1903. So that gives you a little bit of an indication as to how old that tool is. There are modern, slight variation alternatives of this, but that plane itself is quite old indeed, and I think that's pretty cool to know that that still has a place in my shop alongside all of the other techie stuff that I use on a daily basis. So we're ready to bond that edge capping onto my plywood. Now bonding to the edges of plywood needs a little bit more care, so we want to adopt a two-step bonding process here. And you can see me wetting that out with unthickened epoxy first, and you can see those end grain lines within the plywood and how absorbent they are with drinking that unthickened epoxy. So I do a couple of coats of that, allowing each one to tack up before I move on to the next, just to make sure that that end grain is properly fed and we get a good bond there. I then roll a lightly thickened epoxy on the surface, again 105, 205 with 206, just to thicken that up a little bit, and then I can place the timber where it needs to go. So what I need to do now is just to mill off the top edge of that chine clamp so that it's parallel to all the framing, so that I can put the chine flat into place. I decided to use one of the top side battens for this because it's already got holes at each of the frame stations, so I could fix this down onto the flat layer, use my router to run along that, and then cut the top of the chine clamp flat. So I used some smaller screws that would pull down inside this timber and mean that I could run the router over the top of it. Change from the stepped base over to a flat base, and then with the addition of a fence included as well, which would run along the outside of the chine clamp, that could position my router, and it allowed me to mill everything nice and flat, nice and quickly. If you're enjoying this project and you would like to help support the project and also support the channel and the business as a whole, then please take a look at Patreon and consider coming on board there and pledging a little extra monthly amount to help me fund this boat, which I'm currently trying to do self-funded, which is a bit of a challenge at times. Greatly appreciate everybody on Patreon who's currently supporting the project and helping make this work and making it so that I can keep bringing these videos to you guys. So that's my chine flats built, inner face veneered, or it's not a bit too big to be classed as a veneer really, but capped off so that we don't see that edge grain plywood. Really pleased with how that's looking, and then we'll shape the outside of this once this is bonded in place. You can see the little difference here, so that's where this next little triangular piece is going to go, so that we can land the bottom planking into the chine flat. We'll get it bonded onto the clamp, and one step further on. So really pleased with how that looks. I really like how the ply looks actually on the inner face, so I'm pleased I didn't go to the massive extent of machining all of those veneers as well. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it as always, and I will catch you in the next one where we will get this little moulding put in, we'll get all this bonded in, and that'll be the chines done. So catch you in the next one. Cheers.